Well, we've seen further violent escalation in the war in Ukraine, including the targeting of civilians and civilian areas. There is a loud cry for international justice, both for the war crimes committed on Ukrainian territory and as a deterrence. I'm joined now by Karim Khan, Chief Prosecutor at the International Criminal Court here in The Hague. You're very welcome to Global Conversation, Chief Prosecutor. In light of what we've seen in the last few days, in Bucha, we saw the UN Human Rights Committee investigate nearly 30 towns where they found evidence of execution, of rape of children as young as 4, of adults in their 80s. What is the role of the ICC in prosecuting these grievous crimes?
The role of the prosecution is to make sure that there is accountability, that there's no safe haven for impunity. There's not a growing belief that anything can take place. There's no consequence when crimes take place, and that requires us to be on the ground. It requires us to investigate and get to the truth, and then to have the stamina to use the processes of the court to present cases to the independent judges for review if we say crimes have been committed.
Because we have seen Ukraine has prosecuted some people within their national courts.
Absolutely.
But I guess the point is, when will we see generals, soldiers, military personnel responsible for these crimes in a courtroom?
Well, that's a function of evidence. But certainly, I've said it before my election, and I commenced my term in June of last year, that we have a responsibility to show international justice is not some theoretical construct. It actually is felt by the victims and those that need the law the most vulnerable, the children, the women and the men that are civilians that are suffering hugely, that are fearing uncertainty in Ukraine, but in so many parts of the world. So I'm quite cognizant of the fact that international justice cannot be seen as an historical exercise, looking into inquiries of past allegations of historical interest.
I mean, would you envisage a tribunal here in The Hague in complement to the national court system of Ukraine? Is that how it would look? Because that's what's being called for, something like what we saw with Yugoslavia, Rwanda and so on.
Certainly, you're right. The principle of complementarity is a bedrock principle. In that regard, we've had very good cooperation with the authorities in Ukraine. We are working with them closely. We are independently conducting our investigations because, of course, we have certain legal architecture that Ukraine doesn't have. We do have provisions for genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity. We do have the capacity to charge not just direct perpetrators, the people that may be alleged to rape or kill or bomb, but military or political superiors. That is something that we have as a legal tool under the Rome Statute, and we will use it if the evidence calls for that.
Because, of course, you mentioned that this is echoes of Nuremberg. You said that at the United Nations. I mean, potentially, are you saying that that Vladimir Putin, for example, the president of Russia, could find himself in a war crimes tribunal here in The Hague?
Well, it's clear since Nuremberg that neither is superior orders a defence, nor is the official position of an individual as a general or as a president or as a prime minister grounds for immunity. The International Criminal Court, as an international court, recognised by the Security Council, used by the Security Council in Sudan, in Libya and other cases, has jurisdiction to deal with any individual that has committed crimes or has prevented or failed to punish crimes within our jurisdiction.
That would also mean they're immune in the case of any peace deal or negotiated settlement between Ukraine and Russia?
Well, there's no immunity for international crimes, and one of the Nuremberg principles, as you'll know, is that there's no statute of limitations for war crimes or crimes against humanity. So, in terms of crimes that are hostis humanae generis, that are crimes against humanity, that are, that violate these basic principles of our humanity, there can't be a safe haven, and the law has a role, and we will do our part.
And from your own evidence, what you've seen, yourself personally and so on, as well as the rhetoric that we're hearing from Russia, from Russian generals and others, a lot of legal experts say this is genocide ideology. Is that something that you feel you may be investigating?
We're in a very critical moment. The minute leaders talk about using violence, using bombs, using the bullet, it's a matter to pause and think, where are we going? But the minute we talk about tactical nuclear weapons, it's not just a twilight zone, it's the eve of a nightmare, and we need to take it extremely seriously, and I think the law has a role to play. This is not a Hollywood movie. This is not something that is some drama. This is something that is up close and personal to too many, and the Ukrainians that are scattered now throughout of Europe, that are out of their homes, that are separated from their loved ones, those like members of my team that are in Kyiv, that are in basements, wondering when the next missile will hit, these civilians deserve every protection.
What is the process then if there is evidence of breaches of the Geneva Convention by specific individuals? Is there a process then where those people can be arrested on Russian territory, on Ukrainian territory?
I'm not going to go into any specific scenarios, but certainly it's well known, and we've seen it in the former Yugoslavia, in Rwanda, we've seen it in the International Criminal Court, that if I make a determination after investigations that there are grounds to believe an individual has committed crimes, I can apply for a warrant. Judges will determine whether or not the standard is met, and then we go into a stage of looking at arrest option possibilities, or people have voluntarily surrendered. We've had heads of state that have voluntarily surrendered before this court. Just
one final question before I let you go. As a legal expert, we saw the Kerch Bridge being bombed in occupied Crimea. Is that a legitimate military target in your opinion, given that we are in the middle of a war and this was an occupied territory?
I'm not going to comment on that because actually I don't even know what took place. I've read from the public information a number of scenarios between, an accident to sabotage to, a whole variety of issues. But, in terms of what that attack may constitute, I'm not going to, how enticing it is to make an opinion on your programme about whether or not that one instance may be a crime or may not be a crime, whether it was a legitimate target or not. One thing is clear, you cannot deliberately, intentionally target civilian objects, schools and hospitals, places of residence of civilians, unless they're being used to gain a distinct military advantage, and even then there is a rule of proportionality, and that this is something applicable, and of course you can extrapolate from that in terms of a variety of different targets, whether they're bridges or energy locations, but spreading terror is not allowed.
Okay, Karim Khan, Chief Prosecutor here at the International Criminal Court, thank you very much for joining us on the Global Conversation.
Thank you for having me.